Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Clerk Day. I move second reading of Bill 96, loi visant à sensibiliser le public.
Act to raise awareness about radon, provide for the Ontario Radon Registry, and reduce radon levels in dwellings and workplaces.
Speaker, an act to raise awareness about radon, provide for the Ontario Radon Registry, and reduce radon bills in dwellings and workplaces.
Mr. Qaadri has moved second reading of Bill 96, an act to raise awareness about radon, provide for the Ontario Radon Registry, and reduce radon levels in dwellings and workplaces. Pursuant to Section 98, the member has 12 minutes for his presentation.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I appreciate this time allotted to me to raise a very important issue which I think has deep public health implications going forward. At the outset, I would like to thank my colleagues, not only MPP Reza Maridi of Richmond Hill, Minister of Research and Innovation, for originally fathering this particular bill, but also a subset of our Healthcare Caucus, the Honourable Sue Wong, Scarborough Agincourt, a registered nurse, and the Honourable Dr. Helena Jasic, Oak Ridges Markham, one of my physician colleagues in the caucus, who will also be speaking to this bill. At the outset, Speaker, I think we need to have a quick orientation. I apologize if the physics may be getting into some of the elevated science talk, but there is a famous element, maybe a dangerous, possibly even somewhat evil element out there called uranium-238. Of course, many of us will be familiar with this particular element, as it is originally, of course, what's been used in a highly enriched manner to create the atomic bomb, nuclear bombs, both strategic and tactical. The issue is that this is a very, very prevalent element throughout the world and in our soil, certainly throughout Canada, North America, and essentially anywhere you look. It's a very heavy element, which means it's sort of like it's a balloon at the microscopic level, and it's got lots of little particles inside. These are, of course, known as protons, neutrons. By the way, it has 92 protons, 146 neutrons. They don't all want to stay in there, and they leak. And that, of course, is the issue today. Because when they do leak, when they create what are called daughter products or progeny, essentially have little babies, which essentially populate our homes, our air, whether it's this air that I'm breathing here in Parliament, or, by the way, particularly in enclosed spaces, and this is, of course, the health implication for Ontarians, in attics, in basements, in crawl spaces, even more so when you go deeper into the earth, whether it's mines, particularly, by the way, obviously uranium mines, but many, many other kinds of mine situations. That's when the concentration of this leaked byproduct of this evil element, uranium, can accrue to such a concentration that it leads to real impact and, unfortunately, negative health effects for Ontarians. I would also, of course, as I'm speaking, acknowledge the presence of the Honourable Steve Mahoney, who is the head of the Radiation Safety Institute of Canada, as well as my colleagues from the Canadian Cancer Institute, who are here to lend both material and moral support for this particular bill. So what actually is going on? The radon byproducts that eventually come from this ever-present uranium, and by the way, just to mention, you can't actually wait for this stuff to go away, because you'll be pleased to know that the uranium half-life, half of it will live on for more than 4.5 billion years, which is likely exceeds the mandate of even the most popular government. But in any case, this stuff is not going anywhere. And if it has an enclosed space, as I said, attics, basements, and so on, and by the way, buildings which have very poor ventilation, which is maybe half the buildings in the country perhaps, that is when the products of this gas, actually parts of them, become solid particles, and they basically fly around on the dust that we inhale, and they actually are inhaled and go into the lungs. So that is, of course, unfortunately, a cause of about 15, maybe 20% or so of the lung cancer in Canada. So about 80%, let's say, of the lung cancer in Canada is caused, of course, primarily by smoking, but 15 to 20% or so is actually caused by inhaled stale air, radon gas particles. And that's a major deal if you think about it. And by the way, we know this because unfortunately we're seeing more and more folks who don't actually smoke, who are yet coming to our medical attention because of lung cancer. And there's of course many other conditions or many other triggers of lung cancer. It's not only smoking and radon gas, it's usually a menu of choice items that are all selected and, for example, genetic predisposition, family history, and so on. But when you align all these various negative factors together, and that is one issue that unfortunately is becoming more and more prevalent, and I have to say that with this particular bill, Ontario has the opportunity of joining many other jurisdictions across the world, be it, by the way, the United States or the United Kingdom, that are much further along in institutionalizing, formalizing, codifying the monitoring, the regulation, and the remediation of airspaces that have excess radon gas. So, as I was saying a little bit about the history, uranium-238 found essentially everywhere, soil, rock, water. It's in this particular building, in the air, it's underneath us, and of course that has deep implications for our built environment, which is becoming more and more common. As I mentioned earlier, radon gas, when it's released, it's released first of all into the atmosphere, which more or less dissipates, but when it essentially leaks into, is caught, is trapped in enclosed environments, which all of our homes, our work environments and so on have these types of issues, that is when the concentrations of those decay particles, those progeny or fissionable particles, actually collect on little pieces of dust, microscopic pieces of dust. I can give you the micron measurement, but I'll spare you. But that's the stuff that we inhale, and it actually, over time, can lead to real cancer DNA effects within our own cells. We know this, unfortunately, Speaker, particularly because, as I was mentioning, if you need a really enclosed space, talk to miners. And there are studies that, unfortunately, thousands of folks in various, for example, uranium mines in Elliott Lake, 220 documented deaths and up to 400 estimated lung cancer deaths from the Elliott Lake uranium mine, a single mine alone. And it's been on sort of the watch list, radon gas and its health effects, even from 1974. The Ontario Royal Commission on Health and Safety in Workers in Mines issued the kind of warnings, but I think there's been a lag for us to actually institutionalize these types of issues. I will give you, for example, I know, Speaker, we're not allowed to use props, and far be it for me to ever use a prop in this chamber, but this actually is a radon measurement kit. Basically, it's placed within a basement or an enclosed space, usually the lowest space in the home, because I guess that's where the air is going to be heaviest and sink. It's left for a certain period of time, and it's a long-term measurement. It's not like, for example, a carbon monoxide or, by the way, smoke alarm. Doesn't go off instantaneously, but it can be, you leave it, it allows the radon to collect. It's sent away to a third-party laboratory, and then a report is generated. And of course, there's lots of numbers attached to the radon radiation reading. For example, 200 is a kind of, again, I'll spare you the units because that gets into high-level physics. But in any case, if the radiation reading or the reading is 200 or above, that is considered potentially dangerous and needs to actually be, as we say, remediated or addressed, dealt with, because situations in which people are breathing that material on an ongoing basis exposes them to true radiation-induced DNA damage, and as I'm sure all of you will appreciate, that can have deep long-term health effects. And as I said earlier, folks from the Radiation Safety Institute as well as the Canadian Cancer Society are very much here to support us in that. So, for example, about 2,000 lung cancer deaths occur because of radon itself in Canada. 40% of those, about 800 in terms of number, are dying in Ontario. So 800 Ontarians dying because of radon, often many of them non-smokers who unfortunately end up developing lung cancer. Now, why is this important? Can't we train a dog or buy some monitor at Canadian Tire or put some little acid paper out and see if it turns blue? No. This is a colorless, tasteless, odorless gas. It has effects, but it is part of the background radiation. What I was startled to realize that despite, by the way, cosmic radiation, despite all the different things you might think your radiation that's coming your way because of either chemicals in the environment or, by the way, substances or even, for example, TV screens, whatever source of energy source that you're near, unfortunately, the most background radiation that you will be exposed to is actually from radon gas. So this is not an obscure thing. It's not a made-up thing. It's not an environmental tree-hugging thing. It is something that is real. It's causing illness. It's widespread. Everyone is exposed to enclosed airspaces, whether it's in the home setting, the work environment. And I think as we're learning more and more about these DNA damage effects, that's why the call is going out, especially when we have, for example, daycare centers, universities, hospitals, the very places where we want to ensure physical, mental, social peace and safety in those environments. Those are the very, very places that we need to have institutionalized, codified measurement so that we can actually see across the board, particularly in our public spaces. So, Speaker, with that, as I mentioned earlier, I'm honored to have the support of a subset of the Healthcare Caucus, Dr. Helena Jacek from Oak Ridges Markham, and the Honourable Sue Wong, a registered nurse from Scarborough Agincourt, and they will also speak to the deep, important, abiding and urgent need for radon measurement and remediation in the province of Ontario to avoid long-term radiation-induced lung cancer and bodily damage. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. For the debate.